Welcome back everyone. Let's go ahead and talk about the OnePlus 8T and see how this bad boy holds up in 2021. Now first of all, as most of you may know, this is already one generation old. OnePlus does, I think, a pretty good job at continuously updating their devices, every 6 months, and I'm a fan of that. I really don't think the OnePlus 9 was that crazy of a phone compared to the OnePlus 8T, but I still think this is a great device for sure. If you want to pick it up, I'll leave links down in the description. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now body wise, obviously this phone still looks pretty good. It looks very modern. It's not going to look old at all for the next 17,000 years. I doubt phones are going to evolve super crazy that much, but the panel, 6.55 inch Fluid AMOLED display, 120 Hz. It is a very good looking panel and it's probably one of the best assets for it. And like I mentioned, I think if you're going to pick up this phone, you're going to get a really good panel, and I'm glad that it has 120 Hz on this one. I'm surprised they didn't make like an 8T and then an 8T Pro. They just made this, but I still think it's a very good phone for sure. Single camera setup at the front. You have USB Type-C, which is awesome. No IP certification, no headphone jack, no expandable storage. The other things I can get by, but IP certification, dude, like these phones deserve it in my opinion. And even at that price tag, it's not like it's a cheap phone. It's still pretty expensive in my opinion. Now on the back, you do have that glass back, which does feel really good. I'm really happy they put this type of glass back on it because it feels very, very good. And then you have that camera setup, which we'll go ahead and hit on right now. So it is a quadruple camera setup. So you have a 48 megapixel wide angle lens, 16 megapixel ultra wide sensor, 5 megapixel macro lens, and then a 2 megapixel monochrome lens. Now those last two camera lenses aren't really that crazy. Really, you're going to be using the wide and the ultra wide sensor. And here's the thing, I'm glad they put an ultra wide sensor in here. We're kind of used to seeing like quadruple camera setups where like it's a telephoto lens and then maybe like an extra lens of some sort at the end that you look at like the Note 21s and stuff, or the Note 20s. And I'm happy for this, 4K 60 on the back, but I have a bigger problem with the front camera. And when you look at the OnePlus 9s, they still pretty much experience the same thing, which is crazy. You have a 16 megapixel front facing camera here, but you can only do 1080p video on this camera. And that's a pretty scary thing when you get a phone like this. Like, I want to be able to use a phone that has a ton of capability and a ton of features, and the quality and the resolution of this front camera really hasn't gone up since I think like the OnePlus 7. I think since those phones, probably even before, they've been pretty much using the same exact cameras for a very, very long time for their front cameras. I'm not a fan of it. I hate it so much, and I'm surprised OnePlus still does it with their latest phones, but it's something that I don't think they'll ever change. Just like IP certification for all their models and stuff, it's a very annoying thing, so I guess we'll see what happens in the future. But I do think overall this camera is a pretty good camera. I think it gets the job done, but it really isn't that crazy. And I think, you're probably better off using like a OnePlus, you're better off using like a OnePlus 7 Pro. Almost it's the same as I think as this camera, to be honest. So in terms of that essentially covers it up there. Now software wise, this is the make it and break it thing for this specific device. Now, as some of you may know, or some of you may have heard, Oxygen OS has been taking a huge toll, and essentially, OnePlus is moving around their whole entire system, the way they're doing things, and I have no idea why they're doing this. It makes absolutely no sense to me. OnePlus should probably know better into, keeping their stuff stock and not going super overboard with, making it seem like a skinned version of Android, because nobody wants it. So this is another thing that kind of happened, and I will say right now, you're probably better off keeping it on a lower version of software, which is pretty crazy. Typically you want to be up to date and everything, but I don't know. It is one of those things that just doesn't make any sense to me. That was one of the best things about the OnePlus series of devices, and now they took it away. So I don't know what they're doing. It's very annoying. Like I mentioned, there's nothing we can do about it, but hopefully in due time they fix it or do something. I mean, we'll see what happens, but that pretty much covers it up in a software standpoint. I will tell you though, the battery standpoint is probably another huge aspect of this specific device. You have a 4500 mAh battery, which is a very big size battery to have on this type of device. And like I mentioned, when you get a phone like this, the one thing you don't have to worry about is the battery. There's a couple other things you may need to worry about, but that battery life on this device is a very strong asset for it, and one of my favorite things about this phone without a doubt. So that essentially covers it up there. Now let's go and end it off with the performance. This device does have that Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 chipset, an octa-core CPU, an Adreno 650 GPU, and 8 gigs of RAM on that base model, and 12 gigs of RAM on that top tier model. And again, this is another one of those devices that just pretty much is top tier in terms of performance. Now, even though it did come out later on in the year, it is almost the same thing as like a OnePlus 8 Pro, to be honest, but it's in a smaller form factor, which is something some people may like. I do like the way this phone performs. It's a very, very good performing phone. And from going from a OnePlus 8T to a OnePlus 9 or 9 Pro, there really wasn't that big of a difference as I saw. They were essentially almost the same exact thing. Now, obviously the 9 and 9 Pro are going to be faster, but this is still like a very fast phone. I really don't think if you're planning on buying this phone or something, it's not like you're going to be complaining about the, performance. And I think that is the biggest asset when you're buying a phone like this. As I mentioned, you don't want to buy a phone and already feel like it's outdated. You are not going to be getting that type of vibe from this phone. And again, when you get a phone, you don't want it to be outdated. Now, obviously, if you have all the money in the world and if you care about, getting every single type of performing thing from a device, then getting something like a Samsung Galaxy S21 or getting something like a, OnePlus 9, those are going to get you better performance at the end of the day than something like this. But I don't know, I would still say get the OnePlus 8T. It's still a very good performing phone. And if you gave me this phone and if you gave me a OnePlus, 9, I really don't think I'd be able to tell that big of a difference, to be completely honest. So that essentially covers it up in a performance standpoint. And to kind of sum up this video and to answer the question, should you go and buy a OnePlus 8T in 2021? Well, this is what I'll tell you. I will say absolutely. I think this phone is still completely worth it in 2021. Obviously, that goes without saying, but that doesn't mean it's like the perfect phone for the price tag. Like I mentioned earlier, this phone is still a pretty expensive phone. It's not like it's a super cheap phone anymore, and it's not a cheap phone regardless because it still has some of the best specs on a phone, but some things do annoy me. Things like the camera on the front, even on the back, for the price that you're paying for it and for how much of their keynotes they always mention the cameras and stuff, they could do a way better job at their camera sensors. The OnePlus 9s can do 8K, but the front cameras are still not that great. And other things like no IP certification, no wireless charging, things like that, those are really annoying things that, every single phone in this day and age has some sort of capability like that. So there's really nothing we can do to, essentially fix that. If it was like a software issue, you can custom ROM things and all that stuff, they can update it, but you can't really update your phone to get IP certification or get wireless charging or something. So those type of issues are always going to be there. So again, that's kind of an annoyance. Like I mentioned, there's nothing we can do about it. We're just going to have to live with it, but it would be pretty cool if OnePlus were to go out of their way and really update these type of devices in terms of like a hardware standpoint. But I do think the OnePlus 8T is still completely worth it. Great phone. Now you know my gripes, now you know my success with this phone, and if you want to pick it up, like I mentioned, links are down in the description. You can get that from there, help support the channel at the same time. But that's really pretty much it. If you guys have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comment section as well. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.